Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. A passenger jet reportedly carrying over 80 people has crashed in Afghanistan's central Ghazni province. Local officials say the aircraft, which went down in the remote mountains of the Dayaq district, is believed to be a Boeing 737-400. Provincial officials say the plane burst into flames on impact. They say the fate of the passengers and the crew is unknown, but casualties are feared. The plane was initially believed to belong to Ariana Airlines, but the carrier has denied the reports. In Iraq, 2 protesters have been killed and 75 others wounded after unknown gunmen opened fire at an anti-government demonstrators in Al-Nasiriyah. Security officials say assailants attacked the main protest camp in Haboubi Square and set the demonstrators' tents on fire. The main protest camp in the holy city of Najd was also burned down overnight by unknown attackers. Clashes resumed in central Baghdad as police fired tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The unrest broke out in October last year with protests against government corruption. France says 3 of its nationals are missing in Iraq. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the government is aware of the 3 French nationals' disappearance, but he said there was no new information on the case. Iraq is currently in a state of crisis as anti-government protests enter their fourth month. Earlier, the U.S. embassy was hit by a rocket attack. Palestine's Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has urged the international community to reject U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan. Addressing a cabinet meeting, Shtayyeh said the plan is meant to protect Trump from impeachment and protect Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from prison. Trump is expected to unveil his peace plan for the Middle East after meeting Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz. Meanwhile, dozens of activists rallied outside a UN office in Gaza City in protest against Trump's peace plan. Meanwhile, 2 Palestinian miners have been shot with rubber-coated steel bullets and injured by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. The incident took place after Israeli forces stormed the town of Bat Omer to the north of Hebron. Rescue officials say Israeli forces stormed an area adjacent to illegal Israeli settlement of Kirmi Sur, provoking clashes. Moving on to China, where the number of coronavirus fatalities has risen to 80. Officials say there are now 2,700 confirmed cases of infection and nearly 6,000 suspected cases nationwide, while over 30,000 people are under observation.
The disease could spread further after the mayor of Wuhan said nearly 5 million residents left the city before it was closed.
There are more than 11 million permanent residents in Wuhan, of whom more than 9.9 million are registered population. The floating population in Wuhan is nearly 5 million. During the Spring Festival holiday, nearly 5 million people left Wuhan because of the festival or the epidemic.
China's Hainan province has confirmed its first fatality, an 80-year-old woman. Beijing has imposed limits on transport around China to contain the outbreak. In the meantime, Hong Kong has stopped residents of Hubei province from entering the territory. The Lunar New Year and national holidays have been extended. With the disease spreading globally, WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus is heading to Beijing to meet Chinese officials. Australia has confirmed its 5th case of the virus, a 21-year-old woman who was on the last flight out of Wuhan. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has called on an emergency meeting with ministers to discuss the epidemic. France has already confirmed 3 cases of the virus, the first in Europe.
7 million Indians have rejected the ruling BJP's Discriminatory Citizen Act by forming a human chain. The 620-kilometer-long chain was formed in the Indian state of Kerala. The state's ruling Left Democratic Front and civil society organized the demonstration, which was attended by activists and politicians. Meanwhile, inspired by the protesters of Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, women took to streets in Mumbai in large numbers. The protests continued through the wee hours of Monday, with women raising slogans of unity and independence. The similar all-women sit-in continues in Lucknow, despite threats of use of force by Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. In a related development, over 300 eminent personalities, including actor Nasiruddin Shah, have written an open letter against the new Citizenship Act. Other celebrities include Meera Nair, Ratna Pathak, Javed Jafri, vocalist T.M. Krishna, author Amitav Ghosh, and historian Ramila Thapar. In their letter, the celebrities expressed solidarity with the civilians protesting against the controversial law. The letter reads, the soul of the nation is threatened as the livelihood and the statehood of millions is at stake. It says, despite the government's claim, the law doesn't appear to be benign legislation only meant to shelter the persecuted. Stating that they are ending their silence, the open letter also stated that they will stand with those who stand for democracy. It also criticized police brutality against students at the Jamia Millia Islamia and Aligarh Muslim universities. Russia has reportedly concluded the delivery of a second S-400 missile system to China. Russia's military says the handover certificate was signed in China in December. It said the procurement consisted of 2 divisions of launch devices, radio location stations, and energy and service equipment. It said China also received 120 advanced anti-aircraft guided missiles. China received its first regimental S-400 set in the spring of 2018. Meanwhile, the UN has called on the US and Russia to extend the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty for 5 more years. The current arms control agreement between Washington and Moscow runs out on 5th of February next year. Under Secretary General Izumi Nakamitsu said the 2 nuclear powers should preserve the New START deal in its original form. In late December, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov repeated Russia's willingness to extend the treaty without preconditions. The Trump administration says there is still time to decide on whether to extend the pact. New START is the last remaining arms control agreement between the 2 states after the US pulled out of the INF treaty last August. Italy's far-right leader Matteo Salvini has failed to overturn decades of leftist rule at an election in the northern region of Emilia-Romagna. With 98% of the ballots counted, Democratic Party Governor Stefano Bonaccini is leading with 51.4% of the vote. Interior Ministry data shows the candidate of the right-wing League and its allies, Lucia Brozzoni, took 43.7% of the votes. Democratic Party leader Nicola Zingaretti said Salvini has failed in his attempt to topple the government. Emilia-Romagna is the largest, most populous and the richest of Italy's red regions. Salvini's bloc did secure a resounding victory in a separate regional election in the underdeveloped southern Calabria region. Bolivia's interim president, Janine Áñez, has asked her cabinet to resign so she can reshuffle the governing body. The presidential office said Áñez will attempt to fill the posts as soon as possible to maintain the continuity ahead of the polls. The statement said Áñez believes it is common to make rearrangements in the executive authority team. Áñez pledged to reveal the new cabinet lineup soon. The interim president already said will run in the upcoming presidential elections in May. This will be a rerun of the disputed vote in October that led to the resignation of leftist leader Evo Morales. Moving on to Libya, where the UN-recognized government claims Commander Khalifa Haftar has opened a new fighting front in the country's northwestern Misrata city. Officials say Haftar's forces are now advancing towards the city, which is allied with the GNA government. Meanwhile, the UN mission in Libya says Tripoli's Mitiga airport was hit by 2 rockets, wounding 2 civilians. Fighting resumed a week after Libya's warring sides and the leaders of Russia and Turkey and the West agreed to a truce and an arms embargo at the Berlin conference. The truce has virtually collapsed with renewed fighting and the UN reports regarding violation of the embargo. 53 people have been killed as record-breaking rains lash Brazil. Officials have expressed alarm over continuing storms in the country. Disaster officials say 44 people are dead in the state of Minas Gerais and 9 others in neighboring Espírito Santo. They said 19 people are still missing. Nearly 20,000 people were evacuated due to the threat of floods and landslides. Rescuers are struggling as several highways have been cut by floods and scores of bridges knocked out. Rainfall in the region has been the heaviest since the records were first kept 110 years ago. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Welcome back. Britain's fishing industry suffered from the UK being late to join the European Union in the 1970s. Since then, fishermen have blamed the EU for the decline in their industry, claiming it gave foreign boats generous access to British waters. They hope Brexit will change that, but there are no guarantees. This report has the details.
Dawn is still hours away when Davy and his crew set off from North Shields in northeast England. The lights of other fishing boats glint on the horizon, but there are far fewer than when Britain joined the EU in 1973. Davy blames Europe's fish-sharing quotas. Boats from the continent now take 6 times more from UK seas than British boats do from European waters.
Our own fleet surely has to come first. When we leave Europe, we've got to be looking at a bigger picture to get a better, sustainable fishing for our own country. Never mind these foreign lads.
Fishing crews like Davies account for less than 0.1% of the UK's economy, but for an island nation like Britain, they're a symbol of independence.
The trouble is, once again, we've been promised, and at the last minute, they'll sell you down the river because they've got no spine, any of them.
25 headings.
Started 15.
Most of these fish are exported to Europe, making some wholesalers worry that any trade dispute with the EU could be damaging.
On a local level here in North Shields, probably 60% of that would go to the European markets predominantly. So without access into those markets, it would really hit the industry hard.
The EU's trade chief has already suggested fish are up for grabs, saying fishing rights could be the price of British access to European financial markets. In a choice between this tiny industry and the vast city of London, Britain's politicians may sacrifice the economic minnow in a bid to steer the wider economy away from the rocks.
In France, researchers have recreated an accurate 3D print of an 18th century musical instrument at a music museum in Paris. Researchers say the replica will give musicians a chance to faithfully recreate the sounds and moods of the epoch. More about this instrument in this report.
The Music Museum of the Philharmonique de Paris has created its own kind of musical time machine by 3D printing replica period instruments. The result is remarkable. The real star of the experience is an 18th century flute, originally made by Jacques-Martin Hauteterre, a famous maker of musical instruments. Project director Stefan Wiedelich says it is an extraordinary tool for recreating the past.
Going back in time for a musical instrument means being able to create a perceptual phenomenon that for the listener will take them back to an ancient time.
Before fabricating the flute, the Research and Restoration Center at the Museums of France put the original through an X-ray topography to identify its original properties.
For example, you see here the first hole, which has what I would describe as a hat shape. Quite interesting and very important acoustically. And if I look at the same one in the 3D printing, well, I really have exactly the same geometrical shape.
Critics have pointed to the downside. The material being used to make the replica is not the original wood, but very modern plastic.
Pakistan's ongoing economic recovery has helped improve its score in the Economic Freedom Index 2019. A report by the Washington-based Heritage Foundation says the country also scored higher in judicial effectiveness and property rights. It gave Pakistan 55 on a scale of 0 to 100, making it the 131st freest economy on a list of 186. It says Pakistan's overall economic freedom score has increased by 0.6 points. The foundation defines economic freedom as the fundamental right of every human to control their labor and property. The Heritage Foundation, with a close link to the Trump administration, has been publishing the index for the last 25 years. Stocks across the globe are tumbling amid fears over the economic fallout from the Chinese coronavirus outbreak. Stocks of leisure and airlines are taking the heaviest losses. Travel and tourism-related bourses are down nearly 2%, with the sector exposed to a slowdown in the travel market because of the outbreak. British Airways owner IAG plunged 5% and luxury brand Burberry dived over 4.5%. London's FTSE 100, Germany's DAX and France's CAC all lost close to 1.5%. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng slipped almost 3%, while Japan's Nikkei was a close second with over 2% losses. Demand for safe haven assets such as Japanese yen and treasury notes are spiking. Meanwhile, China's yuan has fallen in offshore trade to its lowest level in 3 weeks. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.